And we want to turn our attention to another foreign policy topic, Ukraine and Russia in the Donbass region of Ukraine. This is what the fighting sounds like. The war taking place in eastern Ukraine as soldiers there fight Russian troops. Fogh Rasmussen says in order for the fighting to stop, the U.S., Canada, and European nations must provide more weapons along with UN forces to the region. Rasmussen is the former NATO Secretary General, and prior to that, he was the Prime Minister of Denmark earlier today. I asked him about an essay that he wrote for the Globe and Mail in Great Britain. It reads in part, quote, "It is up to the United States and our allies to foster a political solution to this long-term conflict."
Well, I think we should deploy a peacekeeping mission to the eastern Ukraine to make peace and to implement the so-called Minsk deal. This has been proposed 2 years ago by President Poroshenko of Ukraine and recently by President Putin of Russia. However, Putin's proposal is a non-starter. What we do need is a robust mandate for such a peacekeeping mission that will include the right to control the real border between Russia and Ukraine so that we can stop the inflow of Russian military equipment and Russian personnel to Ukraine.
You told Radio Free Europe, though, that Russia's plan to send UN peacekeepers is, in your words, a Trojan horse. Why?
Yes, it's a trap, because if we follow President Putin's proposal, we will just end up having a UN-mandated frozen conflict in eastern Ukraine. Because what he proposed was that the so-called peacekeepers should only control the so-called contact line between the free Ukraine and the occupied Ukraine, and the peacekeepers should only protect the OSCE monitors. So that's a Trojan horse. That's a trap. But instead of just dismissing his proposal, I think we should build on it, improve it, and ensure that the peacekeeping force has a robust mandate.
Prime Minister Rasmussen, can you take a step back and explain what this war is all about?
Yeah, it's all about Russia's ambition to restore Russian greatness in the former or in the territory of the former Soviet Union. And to that end, they want to keep their neighbors as weak as possible and dependent on the Kremlin. And they want to prevent their neighbors from seeking Euro-Atlantic integration through membership of the EU and NATO. And to that end, Russia wants frozen or simmering conflicts in the neighborhood. So this goes far beyond Crimea and Donbass in eastern Ukraine. It's also about Transnistria in Moldova. It's about Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia and Nagorno-Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So this is part of a bigger Russian strategy.
We're talking with Fogh Rasmussen, the former Danish Prime Minister and former Secretary General of NATO. We should point out since April of 2014, an estimated 10,000 people have died in eastern Ukraine. You have just returned from the region. What did you see?
Well, we visited the contact line a month ago, and we have seen that this is indeed not a frozen conflict. As you mentioned, 10,000 people have been killed, 1.5 million people have been displaced, and each and every night you have shelling. We have villages that are divided by this contact line. So it's a very serious situation also when it comes to the humanitarian situation. This is the reason why I have suggested that we should provide Ukraine with better means to actively protect itself against the Russian aggression through defensive military systems.
You have had interactions with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and from your standpoint, how is he able to maintain control of his government, of his people?
Well, first of all, because the inner circle around Putin is very much dependent on him economically, but also, and that's deeply rooted in the Russian society. The Russians are ashamed. They feel humiliated of what happened in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, loss of land, economic and political chaos. And Putin actually restored law and order in Russia, and many ordinary Russian citizens appreciate it. So I foresee that he, thanks to increased or strengthened nationalistic rhetorics, will get an election result when he is running for re-election next year as president, that will allow him to be the Russian president until 2024.
Let me ask you, in your capacity as the former Secretary General of NATO, do our allies, do the NATO countries feel that the U.S. in general and President Trump specifically has the support of our NATO European allies?
Yes, I think when push comes to shove, there is a strong sense of realism. People know that NATO is more important than ever. And this is also a reason why the Europeans have now started to increase their defense investments to reach the goal of spending at least 2% of GDP on defense before 2025. This is very much in accordance with not only what President Trump has requested, but also what President Obama, President Bush, and all their predecessors have requested from the Europeans. So I think we are moving in the right direction. But there is no reason to hide that we need we need determined American global leadership also within NATO. We need a global policeman, so to speak, to restore international law and order, and the only candidate to exercise that task is the United States of America.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen served as the Secretary General of NATO from 2009 through 2014. Before that, he was the Prime Minister of Denmark. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.